That's all right. Let me make 3 quick points. Trying not to repeat what Graham said, with which I completely agreed except for one thing, since he's left the room. And that's the following. I think that while it, of course, can be said that the contributions of Berkeley and LBNL to policy and practice have been substantial over the years, my view is that they haven't been enough. They haven't been good enough. They haven't been rich enough. They haven't been thick enough. They haven't been endurable enough. And the fault is on both sides. It's obviously a problem of uptake by the knuckleheads to whom we deliver ideas and research. But I think it's also a problem of the university in usually failing to take seriously the need to actually build the connections between the research, the policy implications of the research, and the institutional designs needed to actually execute those policies once adopted. All of those steps require the application of synaptic energy. And we usually stay near the bottom of that public policy food chain. On problems that are this serious and this complicated, my view, admittedly biased by my perspective as a lawyer, my view is that the university has a special obligation to reinvent itself to some extent in order to see to it that the brilliant ideas we have coming out of our research are effectively translated and transmitted to decision makers. We can't count on them to reach towards us. We have to reach towards them. That's my first point. Second point I want to make is that I'm the dean of the law school. Dan chairs ERG, but is a professor of law and a internationally renowned expert in constitutional law as well as environmental law. The fact that the law school is involved in this, as well as public policy and economics and ERG and LBNL, these illustrate strengths of Berkeley, which those of you who've grown up in this culture, I think, often fail to fully appreciate. I just arrived on this planet 5 years ago from Harvard. And my strong belief is that there simply is no other research university in the world in which the membranes separating the academic units are as porous, as permeable as they are on this campus. That asset means that we are, I believe, uniquely positioned to make contributions on the most difficult problems, which are inherently multidisciplinary and multi-professional in character. If we can seize upon that rich asset and make even more of it than we have in the past, and combine it with my first point, the commitment to translation and transmission, then I think we really will live up to our mission as a public institution. The third thing I want to say is that there are important parts of the problem that aren't going to be addressed today or tomorrow, as far as I can tell from the agendas. One of them is that has bothered me for a couple of decades now, not just in this context but in others, is that this is the kind of problem that requires enormous creativity and innovation with respect to the mechanisms of governance. This kind of challenge, global in nature, with all of the public choice difficulties that Graham laid out, really is going to require different ways of thinking about the relationships horizontally and vertically among organs of power, public and private. Far too little work is being done at addressing that issue. And the fact of the matter is, whatever shiny, sparkly ideas we have for policy change, for enforcement regimens, for sharing the benefits of innovation, for sharing the burdens of adaptation. None of those will be possible unless humans actually invent different ways of relating to one another. That's a hard problem too. The answer is not going to come out of ERG, so ERG has to help us in drafting the rest of the elements of campus that can contribute on that difficult problem. Let me close with an anecdote. When I worked in the first term of the Clinton administration in the White House, I have to admit that there were just a couple of people who were going around all the time talking about sustainability, and most of the rest of us had no idea what they were talking about. And I remember going to weekly breakfast meetings in the Vice President's office in the West Wing, which we called the Square Office to distinguish it from the Oval Office. And in the Square Office, he would assemble a bunch of people and we would talk about sustainability and we'd talk about the climate and so forth and so on. And I went to about 1.5 years of these meetings, never really got the hang of it. But I listened to these folks, including Todd Stern, who's now our champion of the international negotiations. We are positioned so much better than we were then because ignoramuses like me do have a far better appreciation not only of the nuances of the problem, but of the imperative of the problem. But I want to say that it's not quite as good as all of us might think. When I sat during the presidential transition in the August through December period as a member of the Obama transition board, we debated at length what the key priorities ought to be for Obama's first 6 months, first 12 months in office. And there was a substantial argument that energy and climate change had to be one of the 5 or 6 top priorities. But there was a substantial counter-argument that Copenhagen was coming too soon and that it was impossible, as a practical matter, for the administration to achieve any kind of reasonable progress in Copenhagen, and therefore to elevate climate change to be a presidential priority in the face of the inevitability of failure would be a grave mistake. We had that battle out. Obama insisted on putting it on the front burner, and I think there was a serious effort to make Copenhagen as successful as possible. But the cynics were right. It was simply too little, too late, given the difficulty of the problem and given the depth of the hole in which we found ourselves Inauguration Day 12 months ago. What I do feel, however, is that the administration is really full of people who believe this to the core of their being. And far from being defeatist about this, I know that they are really charged up and ready to go at it and make progress sooner rather than later. Would that I could say the same thing about the Congress. Would that I could say the same thing about the Congress. So the last dismal thing I want to leave you with is the sense that the connection for the public and the politicians who represent them between the urgency of climate change and the science, it's just not there. It is just not there. Indeed, the political pollsters will tell you, do not campaign on a platform of climate change. Campaign on a platform of energy security, not climate change. Climate change is for tree huggers, it's for the left. Energy security is for real Americans. That's the nature of our challenge in politics. But before we get to solving that problem, let's solve the one on your agenda today. Good luck. I wish I could stay. I got to go raise money too. Thanks very much.